Okay.
So this is interesting that he was able to see people, and he had this ability to be outside himself in a way and see them. Do you think that this had anything to do with the fact that, you know, his Ava was Aryan and he was inside and outside of that whole experience at the same time?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think it was the dual thing, the fact that, you know, he loved culture and he was the son of a rabbi, a reformed synagogue rabbi in Berlin, but his hero was Voltaire. He was a passionate student and lover of the Enlightenment, and Voltaire was his great hero, and that kind of skepticism and love of culture at the same time was shared by his wife, Ava. They were both passionate liberals and humanists, and there's no question that gave him a different worldview. It gave him the opposite. He had the exact opposite worldview of fascism. And so he was the perfect person with his personality of being able to step outside and see people from a distance. I mean, he makes these incredible thumbnail sketches of people with one line, like a great writer does, where he observes their essential character and says he wore his hat like an artist, and stuff like that, you know. So you see them immediately, and of course it makes the writing, you know, extraordinary and rich. And
now, she was Aryan. Tell us about that situation, the fact that he was married to a woman who was Aryan. How did that impact on his life?
Well, of course, I think for him, you know, it was a natural extension of everything he believed in, that he would marry an Aryan, a German, because, you know, he was a soldier in the First World War. He considered himself to be German first, absolutely German first. And so it was only natural that he would be married to an Aryan. And what attracted him to Ava was her worldview, her attitude. She had the same attitude towards everything. And she was a soulmate, and that's all that mattered.
And
So,
she saved his life.
and well, she saved his life many times, many times. I mean, she was really extraordinary. One of the things that we could not put in, may I say that, was this incredible moment after the bombing of Dresden, when she forged papers and gave him a new identity with a different name, and forged the papers and did all this stuff, and didn't get caught, and did it so well that, you know, that they didn't get caught. I mean, but she saved his life many times. She was a real heroine, a total heroine. One of the things that here's another wonderful thing that he used to write about. For him, he hated the ideas of military heroes, or anybody that is usually called a hero is not a hero to him. The people who are heroes, he said, are the people you never hear about, who are never written about. The people next door, your neighbors, the people in the grocery store. So those are the heroes when they do something, because they have nothing to gain, no glory, nothing, just the act itself. And so that was one of the reasons that he wrote so passionately about them. That he made them characters in the story for the entire length of their survival or not survival, if they succumbed or if they got killed and murdered. He memorialized every moment and the way they died, but those that survived, he kept records of all of them, all the way.
Somewhere in those tomes, does he talk about, how he came to the title, I Will Bear Witness, or thinking about titles, or do you think that's what I Will Bear Witness is really a tribute to those people?
Well, he didn't think of that title. The diaries were given a title after they were published. And I think they took that title, obviously, because there was a sort of mantra that he would every once in a while go through, where he would realize that these diaries were his duty, became his mission. And the worse things became, the longer the entries in the diary became, because he said he's got to go on and record everything. And so I think they took that as a metaphor for the title.
And did you yourself take it as a metaphor for your one-man show?
I never thought about it, but I suppose, it became so personal for me. I couldn't say that in that way. I just felt I have to do this because it's sort of everything in a way that I believe in, especially his attitudes towards everything, but also his attitude towards people, that it's the little acts between people that are significant. And I thought, that's not what is usually written about. It's usually the other way, It's the guy who gets the gun and, goes after someone, But these little acts, became like incredible stories. There's a story about a red cabbage that's just, we couldn't put it in. I fought with Karen for a long time to get this story of the red cabbage. It's still in the script, but we don't do it. But it's an incredible story in a grocery store,
What's the story?
Well, it's a story of how he goes into a grocery store and he's only allowed to buy certain things and only certain amounts of certain things. And so he's standing there and he makes a joke he asks for something and she says, no, I can only give you so-and-so. And so somebody makes a comment about red cabbage, and he says, yes, well, we got so sick of red cabbage in the First World War, it's no wonder. Maybe it's better, you can't buy them now. And so people they look at him, and she starts giving him. She says, well, I think I can give you this. And then she looks around, and then she gives him something else. And then he's standing there, and suddenly the woman next to him has a big boxer dog, and he makes some comment about the dog, and she says, listen, let me pay for you. And he says, no, please don't do that, because I have the money. He says, no, I want to pay, and I will pay, and so it becomes the scene of this little struggle that takes place. And, in the end, he gets this red cabbage, and he gets all the other stuff, and, these two people just, So, it became like, that little story became, in a way, emblematic of many other things, when he drops potatoes in the street and somebody else comes over and helps him and that was against the law. The person could have been sent off to prison for doing that,
So he would run home every day and write every day the day's events?
Yes, once in a while he'd skip a day, but he'd write everything.
Do it again. Every day, did he write every day?
Oh yes, he wrote every day and sometimes twice a day. Sometimes he would skip a couple of days. It would depend on his own, the constraints and pressures of his only being able to shop between 3 and 4 in the afternoon, and where he could walk and which trains he could take and all of that.
Okay, now, I did want to ask you, another little similarity perhaps is you are also a product of a mixed marriage. Tell me that.
Well, my father, yes, my own family has the similar thing, in that my father is Russian Jewish and my mother's German, and they met. I mean, my father escaped from Russia after the pogroms and right at the beginning of the First World War, and then he met my mother.
I think we got it in the memorializing it. I think we got it. Let's see. Hedwig. Where does Hedwig, we see Hedwig on the tour. We meet her, we know she's his second wife. Because we see so much of her, just tell us who she was and how they met and what she did for him. Just a little portrait of Hedwig.
Well, Hedwig was his student, one of his students at the university when he was reinstated to the university at Dresden, and then actually she wasn't studying at Dresden. He became also a professor at another university, and that's where she was a student. And in 1951, Eva died in 1951, and a year later, he and Hedwig married. And then Hedwig became a professor. She is a professor, of course retired now. And she kept his archives, but in the 80s, I think it is perhaps the middle 80s or late 80s, she sold the house and the archives.
The house that you and she visit is...
Yes, the house. Yes, the great house that Eva dreamt of for years and built out of Norwegian wood. And yes, it's the only wooden house in Dölschen, which is surrounded by all these stucco suburban houses. It was actually the first house in the district to be built there on that hill. I think there was only one other house at the time.
What did you think when you saw it?
I thought it was absolutely beautiful. Because I thought it was much more beautiful than I had imagined. I thought it would be a sort of a clunky house, but actually I thought it was very beautiful. And it had exactly kind of, spirit that I thought. And especially when 2 cats came out and started to run around the yard and play, and then one of them came out. It was quite amazing because of their cats. But, I thought the house was great.
What did Hedwig think of the performance when she saw it?
She said, "That's it." That's all she said, really. I mean, she didn't talk, and she didn't have to say anything more than that. I mean, I think coming from her, that was the greatest compliment. But I think she liked it because she came back to see it again, and I think she saw it 3 times.
So she thinks that you got him.
Yes, yes, I think so. Yes, that's the impression I get.
What was it like doing the performance in Dresden?
Oh.
Was that the most special?
Yes, I think it was the most special performance of all, of course, because it was done in a cafeteria there was not a stage. It was just a plain cafeteria with chairs and nothing, not even a platform, and it was packed, and students and professors were sitting on tables and chairs, and it was just very moving to be there. And a 60-year-old ex-student came to the dressing room just before performance and said, "How are you going to do him?" Like, and I thought, well, I'm just going to try. But it was wonderful. Just, I mean, the whole experience of being in Dresden and then meeting Hedwig there and going from place to place with her, especially the Bruhl Terrace, was very powerful. And it was great.
What was it like doing it in America? Well, you did it in America, right?
Yeah, well, it was different everywhere, I mean, it's the greatest. All I can tell you is the greatest performance was in a Quaker college in Indiana, in Richmond, Indiana. The Quakers just were the greatest audience I ever had. They got stuff in the play that I never got, and were just amazing. It's a very.
Remember anything?
Any particular thing?
When you say they got stuff in the play.
No, I don't remember, but I remember being constantly surprised by reactions and things that sort of, it was as if, oh my God, that is special, isn't it? I mean, they suddenly heard that something was really unusual because he always saw things in an unusual way because of his being able to distance and be very interested in the qualities of something. So, There was
a Lebanese German.
Yes. There was this wonderful young Lebanese German woman who came back after the performance and said, "Oh my God, it reminded me of my grandfather and his library and that whole world." And she was just very affected, very moved by the wonderful. Here's the other thing that's so great about the diaries and even the selections. He gives a complete feeling of a world. That's why I said earlier cherry orchard, because in the Chekhov's cherry orchard, you get the entire world of Russia in that moment. And in the diaries, you get the entire spectrum of what's going on and how people are behaving because of it, because of what's going on. He gives that feeling. And so she got that, the richness of the world. He gives the richness of the characters and the details. It makes it like a great, great novel.
Does his own personal anxiety intrude on that ever?
Yes, sometimes he get very close. Do you mean how is he affected by?
Well, there's this way in which this amazing ability to look at it so objectively objectively, and it's probably a coping mechanism for him. And I wonder, does he ever lose that ability? Does he ever
Yes.
break down?
Yes, yes, yes. In
Yes, what? Saying,
yes, yes, he doesn't always keep his great equanimity, his great ability to stand apart. No, when things got really bad towards the end, when they placed the Jews right in the center of the city because they knew that the bombing was coming, and so they placed all the Jews in the central, in two houses, two big houses in the center of the city, the very, very center. And he, at that moment, he also has to work in a factory. He's doing labor service, and he's working day and night, and then he comes home and he has to do chores and he has to write in his diary, and they're telling him, you know, if they catch you, you're making notes while you're working at the factory. Are you crazy? You know, they're going to catch you. Nobody ever denounced him. That's the other amazing thing, you know, even as things got worse. And yet he said, I've got to write all of this down. I've got to write it down. But you know, the pressures were becoming so incredible because he knew this nightmare was coming. And of course, things were just getting more and more desperate with Germans and Nazism and everything else. So he knew it was, and that's when he has in the text what amounts to like almost a nervous breakdown when he starts attacking former rivals, because he suddenly learns that one of them has just become the chair of the Department of Literature at the Berlin University, and he just goes nuts and bonkers. But also because when Eva doesn't come home, you know, on time, he's becomes really distraught, and you think he's losing it, and he's losing it. He's becoming very frazzled and frayed and.
Did you pick any of those selections for the play?
Oh, yes.
What is one? Is there one around the Jewish star as well? I mean, can you do a little bit of one? Just to see the difference in the language?
I can't, you know, the truth is I can't do it. Oh, yes. Oh, he suddenly has a fit about his diaries, my notes, my diaries. And you know, and the language suddenly becomes much more chopped, and if they are discovered, they will destroy everybody. And then he starts to doubt the fact that he has the right, and he asks himself, is it right, or is it just an act of vanity that I insist on recording everyone? Is it a crime or is it a virtue? And he's tormented by it. It becomes like a great torment that he insists that he goes on documenting when he knows that the more he documents, the greater the danger. And yet he says, I must do it. He's in the hands of something that he can't, you know, he can no longer do anything about, and yet the torment is there, you know, because the pressure is.
But he's saying there, I mean, that makes all the sense in the world to question that act,
Yes.
given the consequences.
Yes.
But
Not only for him, but for everybody else. Because anybody's name who is in the diary gets implicated by the fact that they are in the diary and have conversations with him that are, of course, as we know in this situation, they're all horror stories, and it was against the law to tell a horror story about the Nazis, or so you could get immediately put into a concentration camp for telling a story. So everybody was telling him stories, that he knew, that they knew he was writing down. You know, so everybody was implicated.
How did he handle the star, putting on the star?
Well, that was the other great, other tremendous trauma that when they announced that everybody had to wear the star, he just lost it. He for 3 days he could not go out, and he kept writing, "This is the end. This is the end. How can I do it? I can't go out with this. I can't." And he sort of, fell apart for 3 days, 4 days. Then slowly, with Ava's help, he gathered himself together because he saw that she went on doing kindnesses for other people, and he had already had his own habits of doing kindnesses for people, and so slowly, I think, he re-identified with that part of himself by writing about it. Because writing the diary, the important thing about the diary for him was that it was a way to reaffirm his own faith in his own beliefs, despite everything. After he would write about the horrible thing that had just happened to him, he would end up writing about what he believed in should be, or could be, or might be, or, and it was always a way of pulling himself together and going on.
Why didn't he leave? So many people were leaving.
That's a very complicated question because he had the opportunity, he was even given the money to leave several times by his older brother George, but he had a very difficult relationship with George, and he was deeply, profoundly tied to Germany. And he believed, like many German Jews believed, that this horrible thing would collapse, that it couldn't go on. It was too horrible. It was too stupid. It had to collapse. And yet he kept saying, no, I want to be here and rebuild, to put Germany back together again, And so he really was very devoted to that. And he didn't want to be beholden to his brother, who kept sending him money. And you know what he did with the money? He put it into the house. He finished building the house, Ava's house, with the money that his brother sent him. So as he says in the book, I'm digging my own grave deeper and deeper, but what can I do?